Good evening, everybody. Uneducated economist here. So before I get started on this video, I want to give Bull Boom Bear Bust a great big thank you. He gave me a shout out on his video earlier today, and I really appreciate it. I got quite a few subscribers from that shout out, and I want to thank all the new subscribers who have come to the channel. I've gotten quite a few of you guys over the last couple of weeks, and I really appreciate all the likes and thumbs up and comments that you guys have given me. It's really you guys who are the gold of this channel. I put out the question, I put out the idea, but down there in the comments section, that's where the real gold for this channel is, and I really appreciate you guys for doing that. Now, if you haven't been over to Bull Boom Bear Bust, I'm going to leave a link down in the description to his channel. I'd appreciate it if you go over there and give him a subscription, give him a thumbs up on his video, let him know how much you appreciate all the hard work that he puts in there. Thank you very much, JJ. I really appreciate you giving me that shout out. Earlier today, I was reading on the Federal Reserve some speeches coming from John Williams, the New York, the president of the New York Fed. And quite a few months ago, I think it was back in July, he had a speech where he was talking about the zero lower bound, and they knew that they were going to come into this moment where interest rates were going to run into zero on the Fed funds rate. Right now, they're sitting at 0 to 0.25% on the Fed funds, and they knew that once they got into this zero lower bound, that they would no longer have the ability to stimulate the economy with the dropping of interest rates. He says not to worry, though, and he says don't keep your powder dry. Move quickly to add monetary stimulus more than you otherwise might. So what he is saying there is that typically when the Federal Reserve wanted to stimulate the economy, they would drop interest rates around 5%, but since they run into the lower bound of zero, they cannot drop interest rates in such a manner to get people to go out there and have lower interest rates to buy houses and cars and go on vacation and do different things like that. And that instead what they're going to have to do is start printing up a bunch of money and to start shoving it into the economy any way they can. And that's the reason why you're starting to see so much, like $700 billion in the quantitative easing, which I imagine is probably going to get a lot more, the $1 trillion in repo. All that other stuff is something that they planned on doing way back in July. This is nothing like, new to them. And he said to keep interest rates lower for longer and to let inflation run higher than what you would typically let it go. So now the Federal Reserve would want to try and maintain inflation around that 2%. And what he is saying is that if you keep interest rates low and run inflation higher than 2%, then you can get a long-term average of 2%, since apparently inflation is running under 2% right now. Anyhow, he goes on to talk about how another speech that he gave was in March 5th, and he goes on to talk about this guy, Marvin Goodfriend. Now, Marvin Goodfriend was an economist for the Federal Reserve, and I don't know if he actually worked for the Federal Reserve in like any kind of official position, but he was an economist and I guess like an advisor for the Federal Reserve. And what he had to say was, well, what John Williams had to say about Marvin Goodfriend. I guess Marvin Goodfriend passed away back in December, so he probably doesn't say a whole lot anymore. But anyway, Marvin Goodfriend now, what he was referring to is that this was one of the first people to think seriously about how the constraints caused by the zero lower bound could be relaxed by implementing negative interest rates. So this guy, Marvin Goodfriend, has been thinking about negative interest rates for quite some time. He goes on to say, Marvin's intellectual pursuit of all aspects of the zero lower bound, Marvin's intellectual pursuit of all aspects of the zero lower bound legacy drove him to explore the possibilities of a currency to have a digital component. You guys get that? Although many think of central bank digital currencies as a newfangled idea, Marvin was thinking deeply about this prospect long ago. So this whole idea of central bank digital currency is nothing new, and this guy has had this rolling around in his head for quite some time. Now, what I found interesting is that when I went to go do some research on this central bank digital currency, I came across an article interviewing a former chairman for the Commodities Future Trading Commission, this guy Christopher Giancarlo. And what he had to say is when we talk about a digital dollar, we're talking about the virtual world. And that he goes on to say that we have the same currency of payment that you have in the analog human world. So instead of using like a digital currency in the aspect of like, say, credit cards or debit cards or something like that, but to actually have a currency that is a digital currency, not one that it uses like a digital technology. All right. But now he said something very interesting in this interview. And like I said, I'll leave links down in the description for all this stuff. And he says, I think the market is always better when there is a lot of competition out there. An instrument like Bitcoin may serve to the equivalent to the digital dollar, might be equivalent to the digital gold. You guys hear that? So this guy is referring to Bitcoin as being digital gold. Very interesting stuff. See, now, a lot of people, when Bitcoin first came out, thought Bitcoin as like an anonymous currency, but it's not. Every single transaction on the Bitcoin digital ledger has been recorded. You can go and find it. And if you can figure out whose wallet is whose, then you can see every transaction that that person has ever made and every transaction that that person has ever made with whoever that person has ever made a transaction with. It is all recorded. And you know, it's funny, people say that it's used for criminals and misbehavior of all kinds. But yet the FBI just loves it because they can see every single transaction that any criminal has ever done if they can figure out which wallet is theirs. See, a lot of people look at Bitcoin as a great concept, and I think it is. Personally, I think the idea of a distributed ledger system for currency is a wonderful concept. I really do. But I don't have the same feelings towards it that a lot of these Bitcoin enthusiasts have. I have no idea if Bitcoin's going to run up to $1 million or if it's going to go to zero. And I'm not one to try and say, hey, Bitcoin is the next best thing to currencies. I used to think that way, but now that I've gotten some research in, I realize that there's a lot more to this digital currency than I had originally thought. And I'm starting to think that the whole Bitcoin idea was a concept that came out of the Federal Reserve. I'm really starting to think that. Now, I could be wrong on that, but nobody knows who Satoshi Nakamoto is. And if he is, Satoshi Nakamoto, is he a made-up person, a group of people, an individual programmer? I don't know. A lot of people think that they know who he is. I'm not saying that they're wrong. But all I'm saying is that they have been talking about digital currencies for quite some time. And this guy from the CFTC, he looks at Bitcoin like it's digital gold. Now, something I found interesting is that there's an IMF paper out there, an article, talking about how negative interest rates would be almost impossible as long as you have folding paper currency in the system. Because once you take negative interest rates to the bank accounts, everybody's just going to run out there and pull their money out in cash. Because they're no way going to deposit their money into the banking system knowing that they're going to have a negative interest rate attached to it and that they would lose money over time simply by having their money into a bank account, into a savings account or checking account, if it has a negative interest rate attached to it. So the IMF's proposal is that you have two currencies. You have regular currency, like we use right now, and then you have something called e-currency, central bank digital currency. And the idea is that if you have money deposited in the bank, it is going to be deposited inside of e-currency, which will have a negative interest rate attached to it. And if you pull your cash out, what they're going to do is devalue your cash to the e-currency, so that over time, when you go to put cash back in the bank, it's going to be devalued to the e-currency, which is going to carry a negative interest rate to it. And I'll leave a link down in the description for that one as well. Very interesting stuff coming. We are running into the zero lower bound. We have hit it. And now negative interest rate is the only way that they're going to be able to, the central banks anyway, to continue to stimulate the economy. And they're going to do it with e-currencies, where if you deposit your money in the bank and you leave it there, you're going to lose it over time. And they're going to force you to take it out of there and spend it or invest it or do something with it, because you don't want to lose it by leaving it in the bank. Very interesting times we're coming across. You read these Federal Reserve speeches and you look deep into them and you can realize that everything is playing out right now. This whole stimulus package, that's part of the Federal Reserve's concept. To spend as much money as you possibly can, to get as much money out there into the system to get you spending it. And then when it comes time to run it down into negative, they're going to issue out that digital currency. So watch out for the Fedcoin. Watch out for cryptocurrencies. Another reason why I like gold and silver. Uneducated economist, you guys let me know.